The African Union Mission in Somalia is an active, regional peacekeeping mission operated by the African Union with the approval of the United Nations in Somalia. It is mandated to support transitional governmental structures, implement a national security plan, train the Somali security forces, and to assist in creating a secure environment for the delivery of humanitarian aid. As part of its duties, AMISOM also supports the Federal Government of Somalia's forces in the battle against Al-Shabaab militants. AMISOM was created by the African Union's Peace and Security Council on 19 January 2007 with an initial 6-month mandate. On 21 February 2007, the United Nations Security Council approved the mission's mandate. Subsequent 6-monthly renewals of AMISOM's mandate by the African Union Peace and Security Council have also been authorized by the United Nations Security Council. The duration of AMISOM's mandate has been extended in each period that it has been up for review. Lastly, in October 2014, the current mandate expires on 30 November 2015. Until that time, its maximum allowed strength is 22,126 troops. In August 2014, the Somali government, assisted by AMISOM, launched Operation Indian Ocean to clean up the remaining Al-Shabaab-held pockets in the countryside. Origin of the mission. AMISOM replaced and subsumed the aid peace support mission in Somalia, which was a proposed intergovernmental authority on development, protection and training mission to Somalia approved by the African Union on September 14, 2006. IGASOM was also approved by the United Nations Security Council on December 6, 2006. IGASOM was originally proposed for immediate implementation in March 2005 to provide peacekeeping forces for the latest phase of the Somali civil war. At the time, the Islamic Courts Union had not yet taken control of Mogadishu, and most hopes for national unity lay with the transitional federal government, which had organized in Nairobi, Kenya in 2004 and were planning to establish a provisional capital in Baidoa Bay region, Somalia. By May 2006, the situation was radically different, as the ICU had recently been engaged by the Alliance for the Restoration of Peace and Counter-Terrorism, or ARPCT, and was fighting for control of Mogadishu in the Second Battle of Mogadishu. By June, they had established control of the capital. Fighting began to spread to other parts of the nation as the ICU gained ground. Plans for IGASOM continued, though by July there were indications of opposition from the ICU, who saw the initiative as a US-backed Western means to curb the growth of their Islamic movement. Until December 2006, the UN Security Council had imposed an arms embargo on the group, but the embargo was partially lifted and a mandate for IGASOM issued on 6 December 2006 for 6 months. On 21 February 2007, the United Nations Security Council authorized the African Union to deploy a peacekeeping mission with a mandate of 6 months. In March 2007, Ugandan military officials arrived on the ground in Somalia. On 20 August 2007, the United Nations Security Council extended the African Union's authorization to continue deploying AMISOM for a further 6 months and requested the Secretary-General to explore the option of replacing AMISOM with a United Nations peacekeeping operation to Somalia. Mission planning. Scope of the mission. IGASOM was expected to eventually reach 8,000 troops, with an expected cost of $335 million for the first year. According to UN Security Council Resolution 1725, states bordering Somalia would not be eligible to deploy troops under IGASOM. The remaining IGAD member nations include Sudan, Eritrea, and Uganda. Because of the objection of the burden falling on these three nations alone, the mission was expanded to include other member states of the African Union. AMISOM has a different composition. As proposed, it is to comprise an initial 3 battalions, growing to a total of 9 battalions of 850 troops each, which would serve for an initial stabilization period of 6 months. The mission was to be modeled after the African Union mission in Burundi. ICU resistance. As early as March 25, 2005, Sheikh Hassan Dahir of the Union of Islamic Courts warned any peacekeepers would be unwelcome in the country. He was quoted by the BBC as saying, "We will fight fiercely to the death any intervention force that arrives in Somalia." Yet at the time, the ICU was not the political or military force it was to become later. Faced with the ascendancy of the ICU after taking over the capital in the Second Battle of Mogadishu between May and June 2006, UN watchers were growing concerned with the level of hostility of the ICU towards the proposed IGASOM mission. Though IGAD and the ICU met and published a cordial and formal communiqué committing the ICU to the IGAD plans on December 2. By the time United Nations Security Council Resolution 1725 was passed on December 6, the ICU was openly and militantly opposed to peacekeepers entering Somalia and vowed to treat any peacekeepers as hostile forces. Because of regional divisions, there were also UIC resistance to allowing Ethiopian troops be part of the mission. Ethiopia, for its part, was leery of allowing Eritrean troops to be members of the IGAD peacekeeping force. In the face of ICU threats, Uganda, the only IGAD members who had openly offered to send forces, withdrew in the face of concerns of the present feasibility of the mission. In Uganda's defense, the crisis does not allow for peacekeepers when there are active hostilities conducted with heavy weapons. On January 1, 2007, after the defeat of the ICU in various battles in December 2006, Uganda again renewed its pledge of a battalion of troops. Between Uganda and Nigeria, there was a pledge of a total of 8,000 peacekeepers. Ghana, Rwanda and Tanzania were reported to be considering sending forces, gathering support following the defeat of the Islamic Courts Union in December 2006. January 2007, the international community began to gather both fiscal commitments as well as military forces for the mission. Nations of the African Union outside the IGAD community were drawn on to provide support. On January 17, 2007, the U.S. ambassador to Kenya, Michael Ranneberger, said the U.S. pledged $40 million to support the deployment of a peacekeeping force for Somalia. By January 20, the European Union followed with a pledge of €15 million. On January 19, 2007, the mission was formally defined and approved by the African Union at the 69th meeting of the Peace and Security Council. On January 22, 2007, Malawi agreed to send a half battalion to a battalion for a peacekeeping mission to Somalia. On January 24, 2007, Nigeria pledged a battalion to join the Somali peacekeeping mission. On February 1, 2007, Burundi committed to the peacekeeping mission, pledging up to 1,000 troops. By March 27, it was confirmed that 1,700 Burundian peacekeepers would be sent to Somalia. On February 2, 2007, the United Nations Security Council welcomed the advent of the African Union and IGAD-led peacekeeping mission. On February 5, 2007, even Tanzania offered to train Somali government troops, but not to deploy peacekeepers. On February 9, 2007, a gathering of 800 Somali demonstrators in North Mogadishu, where Islamist support was strongest, burned U.S., Ethiopian, and Ugandan flags in protest of the proposed peacekeeping mission. A masked representative of the resistance group, the Popular Resistance Movement in the Land of the Two Migrations, said Ethiopian troops would be attacked in the hotels. The same group had made a video warning peacekeepers to avoid coming to Somalia. By this date, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, Malawi and Burundi had committed to the peacekeeping mission, but the total force was about half of the proposed 8,000-strong force. Uganda had pledged 1,400 troops and some armored vehicles for a mission lasting up to 9 months, and the OU had pledged $11.6 million. On February 16, 2007, Uganda announced it would deploy 1,500 well-seasoned troops as early as Saturday, February 17, 2007, under the command of Major General Levi Karuhanga. The troops had been training for 2 years in preparation for the mission. The Burundian troops were technically ready to go in early August 2007, but equipment promised by the United States and France had not yet arrived. On December 23, 2007, an advance force of 100 Burundians was deployed and another 100 soldiers arrived on the 24th of December 2007. By late 2008, 1,700 Burundian soldiers were deployed to Mogadishu. Expanding role. In a closed-door meeting in Kampala on the 22nd of July 2010, OU ministers agreed to expand the mission's mandate from a peacekeeping focus to a peace enforcement focus that would engage Al-Shabaab more directly. The decision came soon after deadly bomb attacks in the Ugandan capital. A few days later, in response to UN pressure, the OU agreed not to expand the mandate but to allow preemptive strikes against Al-Shabaab and promised more troops from other African countries. On July 23, 2010, Djibouti and Guinea pledged troops to AMISOM. On the 17th of September 2010, an OU envoy said in Nairobi that AMISOM size had grown from 6,300 to 7,200 troops after an additional battalion from Uganda joined the force. In December 2010, the UN backed AMISOM in increasing the mission's authorized size to 12,000, and at the same time reports indicated that Uganda had promised an extra 1,800 personnel, with Burundi an extra 850. In March 2011, Burundi sent 1,000 extra soldiers to AMISOM, bringing the total number of Burundi troops deployed to 4,400. AFP, reported in Africa Research Bulletin, said Burundian military chief General Godefroid Niyombare said on the 14th of March 2011 the soldiers had been deployed a week before. In February 2012, the UN Security Council boosted the amount of troops deployed from 12,000 to 17,731. The approval comes after a series of recent successes against Al-Shabaab fighters who had previous positions throughout the central and southern areas of the country. During the same month, OU Commander Fred Mugisha suggested that Al-Shabaab was at weakest and would likely implode in the not-so-distant future owing to successive military defeats that it suffered, as well as an exodus toward the Arabian Peninsula of hundreds of the group's fighters. Due to the successful military operations against the Islamists, the United States has also been stepping up efforts to train and equip the AMISOM AMISOM troops in a bid to stamp out the Al-Shabaab insurgency and limit its influence. In October 2011, a coordinated operation between the Somali military and the Kenyan military began against the Al-Shabaab group of militants in southern Somalia. The mission is officially being led by the Somali army, with the Kenyan forces providing a support role. On the 12th of November, the Kenyan government agreed to rehat its forces under AMISOM command, and later announced in March 2012 that it would be sending 5,000 troops to join the coalition. Analysts expect the additional troop reinforcements to help the Somali authorities gradually expand the territorial control. The East African reported in March 2012 on reorganization of AMISOM's headquarters and sector commands. Personnel would be led by the O, with Kenya taking responsibility for intelligence and logistics, Uganda operations and engineer, Burundi plans and communications, Sierra Leone training, and Djibouti CIMIC. There would also be 4 sectors: Uganda responsible for Sector 1, Sector 2 run by Kenya, Sector 3 Burundi covering Gedo, Bay, and Bakul, and sector from which Ethiopia forces were withdrawing from to be directed by Djibouti, following the Westgate shooting in Nairobi by Al-Shabaab operatives. The Ethiopian government halted its plans to withdraw completely out of Somalia. It instead indicated that it would continue to support the Somali armed forces and their AMISOM allies. In November 2013, the Ethiopian government announced that it would integrate its troops that are deployed in Somalia into the AMISOM multinational force. Somalia's Foreign Minister Fawzia Haji Yusuf welcomed the decision, stating that the move would galvanize AMISOM's campaign against the insurgent group. She also emphasized the importance of collaboration between Somalia and Ethiopia. The Ethiopian authorities' announcement came a month after a failed October bombing attempt by Al-Shabaab in the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa, and a week after Ethiopia received a renewed terrorism threat from the insurgent group. According to Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Ambassador Dina Mufti, the Ethiopian military's decision to join AMISOM is intended to render the peacekeeping operation more secure. Analysts also suggested that the move was primarily motivated by financial considerations, with the Ethiopian forces' operational costs now slated to be under AMISOM's allowance budget. It is believed that the Ethiopian military's long experience in Somali territory, its equipment such as helicopters, and the potential for closer coordination will help the Allied forces advance the territorial gains. On the other hand, there is a certain amount of unease following Ethiopia's entry into AMISOM given local animosity originating from Ethiopia's heavy-handed intervention in 2006. There are also fears that Al-Shabaab could use Somali animosity towards Ethiopia as a rallying cry and to recruit in more members. In December 2013, the U.S. government established a military coordination cell in Mogadishu at the request of AMISOM and the Somali government. The unit consists of a small team of fewer than 5 advisors, including planners and communicators between AMISOM and the Somali authorities. It is intended to provide consultative and planning support to the Allied forces in order to enhance the capacity and to promote peace and security throughout the country and wider region. Organization and Command. Force Commanders, Deputy Force Commanders, Chiefs of Staff, Spokespersons, Sectors during mid-2012. Following the success of AMISOM forces in largely clearing Al-Shabaab militants from Mogadishu and after the incorporation of the Kenyan contingent into AMISOM, the force was organized in sectors. Sector 1 covered the Banadir, Middle Shabelle and Lower Shabelle regions. Sector 2 covered the Gedo, Middle Juba and Lower Juba regions. Sector 3 covering the Bay and Bakul regions. Sector 4 covering the Hairan region. Later, in January 2014, following a further troop increase when the Ethiopian contingent was incorporated into AMISOM, the sector organization was modified to Sector 1 UPDF contingent, Sector 2 KDF contingent, with the Sierra Leone contingent operating in their Sector Kismayu until these forces left. During January 2016, Ethiopian troops deployed to Kismayor. Sector 3 Ethiopian contingent. Sector 4 Djibouti contingent. Sector 5 Burundi contingent. Contingents UPDF contingent commanders Ugandan battle groups. For the first deployment of Ugandan troops during March 2007, which saw a contingent of 2 battalions sent to Mogadishu, the UPDF contribution to AMISOM had by 2015 expanded to 3 battle groups, each of 2 or 3 battalions. The following table lists what details are known of the Ugandan battle groups, or UGABAG, deployed under AMISOM. The information presented has been collected from Ugandan press reports and news reports on the AMISOM website. BNDF contingents, ENDF contingents, KDF contingents, DJAF contingents, RSLAF contingent. Leobert 1,850 strong, served in Sector 2 under Kenyan command, later in Sector Kismayu under their own command. A second battalion was announced and intended to relieve Leobert 1 early in 2014. However, unexplained delays meant this second battalion completed first phase training only in January 2014, with planned second and third phase training scheduled to last a further 3 months each. It was then planned to relieve the first contingent in August 2014, but an Ebola virus outbreak in West Africa caused further concerns. During October 2014, it was announced the second contingent had been in isolation for 4 months and cleared of Ebola virus, but this was quickly followed by an announcement from the Sierra Leone Chief of Defense Staff that the contingent would not travel to Somalia. Leobert 1 eventually left Somalia for home only in January 2015. Civil staff. The civilian staff of AMISOM has been operating from Nairobi, Kenya since 2008 due to the security situation in Mogadishu, Somalia. As of now, they number approximately 81 personnel. Since the beginning of 2011, AMISOM and TFG has taken control over several strategic places in Mogadishu after several offensives against Al-Shabaab. With the expanded control over the capital, AMISOM on the 16th of May 2011 moved the civil staff and police officers to Mogadishu. This includes Special Representative of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission for Somalia, Ambassador Boubacar J. Usu Diarra, and Deputy Honorable Wafula Wamuninyi. Much of the key logistical support for the force is provided by the United Nations Support Office for AMISOM, a field mission of the UN Secretariat Department of Field Support. The civilian component is supervised by the Special Representative of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission for Somalia, which is represented on the ground by Ambassador Mohammed Saleh Anadith, who oversees the political, civil, humanitarian, gender and public information departments. Ambassador Epiphany Kabush Maitamwana is the civilian chief of staff. The chief administrative officer Timothy Kiguti heads the support component of the mission, which includes administration personnel, finance and budgeting, logistics and procurement, among other issues. The police contingent, which provides capacity building, both institutional and individual, in support of the Somali police force, is headed by the AMISOM Police Commissioner and Pillay training for contingents. The United States has provided extensive training for contingents headed for Somalia. In the first half of 2012, Force Recon Marines from Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force 12 trained soldiers from the Uganda People's Defense Force. In the northern spring of 2012, Marines from SPMAGTF 12 also trained Burundian soldiers. In April and May, members of Task Force Raptor, 3rd Squadron, 124th Cavalry Regiment of the Texas Army National Guard, took part in a separate training mission with the BNDF in Mudabagu, Burundi. SPMAGTF 12 has also sent its trainers to Djibouti, another nation involved in the Somali mission, to work with an army unit there. At the same time, U.S. troops have assisted in training the Republic of Sierra Leone Armed Forces in preparation for the deployment to Somalia later this year. In June 2012, U.S. Army Africa Commander Major General David R. Hogg spoke encouragingly of the future of Sierra Leone's forces in conjunction with Kenya. As of June 2012, the RSLAF troops have not yet deployed, the Sierra Leonean Defense Minister said on June 23, 2012, that the battalion might depart for the Horn sometime in September. In addition, a significant amount of support to AMISOM has been provided by private companies. Bancroft Global Development, headquartered on Washington's Embassy Row, employs about 40 South African and European trainers who work with Ugandan and Burundian troops. Bancroft director Michael Stock told the East African that these mentors are embedded with AMISOM units in Mogadishu and southern and central Somalia. They coach commanders on how to predict and defeat the tactics which foreign fighters bring from outside East Africa and teach to Al-Shabaab. Bancroft does not receive funding directly from the U.S. government but is instead paid by AMISOM, which is then reimbursed by the State Department for these outlays. The Associated Press reports that Bancroft has been paid $12.5 million for its work in Somalia since 2008. A security analyst in Somalia listed 3 primary private security companies, private military companies operating in Mogadishu, DynCorp, who provide logistical support in the Somali capital, Bancroft International, who provide training to TFG and AMISOM personnel, as well as assisting with community service delivery, and Pacific Architects and AMP engineers.